Souls-like games are definitely not for everyone. These are the kinds of games that test your patience and sanity more than any others, but they also deliver some of the greatest highs when you finally conquer that seemingly impossible boss. So today, we're shining a spotlight on some of the best Souls-like games out there that you can play. By the way, this isn't a ranked list. This isn't like a competition. Just every entry is a great game that is absolutely worth your time. Starting off with number 25, Demon Souls has to be the starting point. I figured at this point, pretty much everyone who cares about this kind of game would be well aware of the history of the Souls genre, and I use genre loosely. I really don't want to call it that, but we got to distinguish these games somehow, and Souls-like works. All right, it's at least descriptive enough. Anyway, nearly all conversations about Souls-like games start with Demon Souls, from Software's original installment in the genre. Released in 2009 for the PlayStation 3, I will note also it's available on PlayStation 5 Remastered, but it's about a decade-plus old game, concepts of interconnected worlds, and the insane technical balancings weren't aspects featured in this game just yet. Demon Souls is a much more rudimentary version of the Souls formula, one that's much slower in comparison to the newer games, more lumbering in its controls and combat, but still incredibly sinister in its gameplay, design, and the depth of its lore. I personally really enjoy the lore myself. While the story of Demon Souls wasn't particularly, knowledgeable to the average player, the hidden depth of this had fans speculating about its tale for years, and thus set down pretty much the standard for lore discussions being a required fixture in the From Software kinda fanbase. At number 24, we have Code Vein. In all of our wording about how visual novels are skewed towards the weeb audience, I've forgotten to mention Code Vein's surprisingly interesting take on the Souls-like, thanks to some very unexpected but very effective tweaks to the formula. Now, on its face, Code Vein is very much a standard Souls-like. You got all of the usual hallmarks of the genre. It's got the slow, weighty combat, it's got the big, tough bosses, but the twist here is, you don't have to go alone. You can take in an NPC with you. You don't have to, though. You can do it old school hard mode. These aren't just meat puppets that mindlessly wander around. They actually do stuff. They tank hits. They do significant damage to enemies. They're not just like a little mild distraction. They provide much needed life-saving support, and honestly, it makes the game that much more enjoyable. The game is just hard enough that you'll still struggle even with a partner, but it's not nearly headache-inducing like some of the other Souls-likes that were inspired by the total emptying out of soul mechanics. I also have to commend the game for how useful but not totally broken partners are. It's just enough to make the game feel way more fair, but not enough to make it a breeze. It's additive, but not subtracting any of the challenge. So, Code Vein, well, more fair experience than most Souls-likes, but still a blast, and a game that looks damn good. There's a lot of detail in this game. Coming in at number 23, we have Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It may not seem that apparent, it's boxed firmly in the action-adventure genre, but it draws a lot of its influence from Souls-like. The combat is very different. It's certainly not nearly as rigid and punishing as a From Software game, but every level in the game is a Souls-level light in terms of design. They're all a series of interlocking corridors and chambers, punctuated by a few shortcuts that lead to a meditation point, aka a respawn area. The biggest giveaway, though, that this game is From Software inspired is that dying causes you to drop all of your experience, which can be regained by hitting the enemy. The difference here is losing your experience points isn't that big of a deal compared to an actual Souls-like game. So in the end, it's a fairly inoffensive and forgiving mechanic. These elements in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order don't make it a Souls-like, but they put it on the outside edges of Souls-inspired. The real differentiator is the action-adventure style story, and it doesn't let tough enemies get in the way of telling that story. There's difficulty modes here, but even the hardest difficulties, it doesn't change in design. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is fully ready to tell its tale and hit hard with its cinematics. It's wildly different from most other challenging Souls-like inspired games, but still retains those features. Next on the list, we have Nioh 2, and this one is a little bit higher rated here than in part 1, but not necessarily to say it's better. Don't get me wrong, so many games are worth mentioning in part 2, but we had to cut it down from a big list, and Nioh 2 ends up here. But what more can I say about Nioh games? They just totally rule, right? Nioh 2 is a massive improvement over its already incredible predecessor. It speeds everything up, it gives the players even more gameplay options in combat, and it adds a lot of new stuff without diluting its fundamental essence of this historical Japanese action horror RPG. Levels feel more open, combat is even tighter, with a bigger variety of weapons, not to mention 3 stances for each one. And the loot grind is somehow even more addictive and compelling here. What really makes the game shine is the bosses. I didn't mention that in the first part, but these bosses are balls to the wall insane. Of course they're tough as nails, but they're some of the most jaw-droppingly creative and absolutely brutal bosses in any Souls-style game. Like, Nioh already had some cool bosses, but Nioh 2 really one-ups them in a big way. Unlike most of the other From Software-inspired Souls-likes, there is no clear central figure to contend with. So, Nioh 2, more lore-based, but just ultimately mysterious. There is a lot going on in this game, and I love it. At number 21, we have Mortal Shell, a Souls-like that sets itself apart with some really cool mechanics. It's a short but captivating game that puts a really unique spin on the Souls formula. Nothing too crazy that it alienates, but it takes enough risks to stand out from the crowd. The big one is the shell. Instead of building your character's stats, you swap between shells. These are the husks of different warriors that define your playstyle. On top of that, they threw a pretty big change into combat, and it's a mechanic that honestly is kind of a failure, but it is unique at least. There's no natural blocking. Instead, you use this ability where you harden yourself to negate a blow. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, and in the game it works perfectly fine. It's just a thing I would find hard to bring to another game or into the real world and compare it in other things. But it's unique. Like, no other game has an ability like this. You essentially can kind of turn in the Stone Man and then mess dudes up. While other games experiment with the formula, Mortal Shell stays very grounded in the Souls format. It's mostly a boss rush with some exploration in between, but it's way more of a unique experience and definitely deserves a spot on this list.
Repent your sins, heathens! Judgment Day is nigh!
At number 20, we have The Surge 2. After experimenting with the Souls-like formula, the team that made Lords of the Fallen found their next footing with the Surge games. Solid gameplay, great settings, and challenging bosses. These games stand out, but it is the Surge 2 that really takes the crown here. The first game saw players exploring exocorporate jungle, and the Surge 2 took that theme and made it actually big and ambitious. Instead of just a single massive facility, it takes place over the sprawling streets and buildings of an entire future city. Levels are interconnected, design is very thoughtful, and bosses are both fun and challenging. It also speeds up the base formula. They threw in the ability to aim at specific limbs. It's nothing too crazy here, but it is a gimmick, but it's not so like thick and sludgy like Lords of the Fallen was at parts. It just makes it a more fun game, and they made the limb targeting to equip new armor and weapons fun enough. Unfortunately, the Surge 2 doesn't do a ton to stand out in terms of world and lore. Other From Software games have that edge, but the idea, the central conceit of all this unique boss equipment, there were some big boy fights, and an amazing level design is enough to earn the Surge 2 a spot on this list. Coming in next, we have GRIME. It's another Metroidvania with the Souls-like DNA running through its veins. While Blasphemous goes all in on the kind of Dark Souls experience in 2D, GRIME is actually closer to Bloodborne in some ways. It's another game that is a little bit slow-moving, and it puts a major emphasis on pairing over other mechanics. Well, I guess parrying wouldn't have more emphasis, but the fact that it has a lot of emphasis ends up putting it in Bloodborne territory, because the whole point of Bloodborne isn't just parrying, it's parrying with the gun, important differentiation. Anyway, it's a challenging Souls-like game with the exploration mechanics you'd expect from a Metroidvania. A big element of this game is you don't gain souls from just beating enemies. You absorb their essence by parrying their attacks, which is easier said than done sometimes. Thankfully, the counter system of this game is pretty lenient, but enemies are aggressive and vary quite a bit in their attack speed, making it challenging to absorb essence, in other words, healing items, and all future upgrade points. Again, when dying means losing it all. It's a brutal game, but incredibly satisfying to master. Add a few cool new mechanics to it, full character customization, optional and selective upgrades you can install every time you explore and discover a new hidden area. It's the extra layer of progression on top of the usually harrowing and very difficult gameplay that makes GRIME earn a spot on this list. And then, number 18 is Blasphemous II, which I think is a well-earned 18. While a lot of games take inspiration from Dark Souls games, the Blasphemous series really managed to capture that same bleak, somber, yet intriguing world. These games are where the line between Metroidvania and Soulslike are blurriest. You could call it one or the other. Blasphemous 2 is an open map with adventure to be had, lots of platforming to deal with, and all the usual things that might make you think of a Castlevania game, but no vampires here. Just something that is deeply dark and disturbing, crafted by the people who make these games. While the difficulty may not be absurd and there's no loss of resources on death, the bosses in this game hit like trains, and they're no pushover for the most part. And Blasphemous 2 goes even further into the weird and disturbing than the already utterly bizarre first game. The world is cold, uncaring, inexplicable, and grotesque. It's the kind of stuff that would have been dreamed up by hyper-religious icon painters hundreds of years ago, if you know what I mean. And it's one of the things that draws players into Blasphemous. It's just its incredible imagery. Prepare to be bombarded with pleading saints and brutal thorns and twisted bodies as you slash your way through Blasphemous 2, a game that's at once terrifying, transfixing, beautiful, and disgusting. It's amazing at what it does. At number 17, we have Thymesia, and what makes a game a Souls-like? It's a hard question to answer. Plenty of developers have taken a stab at the style of Dark Worlds and deliberately punitive combat only to fail, but then there are games like this one that don't just stand out by doing their own thing. No one will mistake Thymesia for a From Software game, but the threads of inspiration are plain as day between the combat, level, and world design. The combat dance is as familiar as ever, evoking the near mystical rhythm of beating enemies to the perfect pitch in a Dark Souls game. This game approaches combat in a different way though. It's a lot closer to Bloodborne, with not just an emphasis on parrying, but a lot of it with special abilities. You've got a consumable tool that can parry absolutely anything, and it's beyond useful for some bosses. Many of the special moves you can equip are fun for messing around with enemies and just provide a little bit extra element to a pretty short experience. It doesn't rest entirely on combat laurels though. The story may not be vital to the experience, but it's incredibly engaging and offers a really fascinating mystery to unravel as you fight to save the plague-torn kingdom of Hermes. It's also incredibly fast. Beating bosses are really only a few of the objectives you need to complete before you're finished with them, but that short run time might be the only downfall for some folks, but others it might make it kind of an appealing, fun, little bite-sized, albeit challenging, Souls-like. Coming in next, we have Steelrising. The same team that developed Greedfall created a bit more traditional-styled Souls-like game, and they packed a serious punch in. Not necessarily in difficulty, but in the atmosphere, settings, and immersive world. Steelrising is incredibly unique in that it is an alternate 1800s France, filled with mechanical enemies and automatons, and put the player in the role of playing one as well. The movement, animations, and everything really sells the Souls-like theme, but the clockwork nature adds a bit of spice to combat and exploration. Moving through these streets are just beautiful, and the fact you're encountering these dark, mechanical, clockwork counterparts makes this game just entrench itself in the Souls dark fantasy nicely. The system's built here and everything makes Steelrising both difficult and rewarding. The bosses are surprising, the exploration is thrilling, it always feels like you have something to do, figure out new innovative weapons to acquire that seriously can change the flow of combat. And if the difficulty gets a little overbearing, there is an assisted mode here to help out with that, which I do have to say I like the idea of something that makes a Souls-like game more approachable, but also doesn't necessarily make it super easy. That said though, I could see some top 19th century revolutionaries really lament the fact they didn't have this in reality, and that you could just fight steampunk bad guys in Steelrising. Next on the list, it's Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. I don't care what anybody says, this game is just a lot of friggin' fun. It may not be the prettiest looking Souls-like game, and not every mechanic hits perfectly, but they are clearly experimenting with the formula and giving us a very Final Fantasy thing to mess around in, even if it is weird as hell. Yes, this was a Final Fantasy game, but it was also made by Team Ninja, and honestly, it feels more like your kind of hybrid Nioh / Final Fantasy story and experience. It does have all of the classic cool stuff from Final Fantasy though. It's got your jobs, which is of course different to all the builds with tons of final moves. It's got the class structure of having a main specialization, and then later in specialization, like this is classic Final Fantasy stuff, and it works perfectly. It's got cool enemies from every single era of Final Fantasy, and a story that basically is lore drops very lovingly placed that lead to eventually just a bomb of what the hell type revelations in the end. Stranger of Paradise is a 70% incredibly unique gaming experience, but that 30% may vary on what you end up thinking about the game. Honestly, for me, it's 10% that makes it fall short. The idea behind this game is just compelling enough that I enjoy it. Difficulty options make it approachable by either casuals or veterans alike. Stranger of Paradise is not your average Souls-like game. At number 14, we have Remnant II, and yes, you can debate how much of this is a Souls-like, but Remnant II seemed to me very much like a Souls game when I'm playing it. It twists the gameplay and changes the formula with the whole gun aspect, but Remnant II is absolutely its own thing. While not quite a roguelike, it's closer to having some of those elements than really all of the other Souls-likes. Levels are procedurally generated each time you play. Bosses come randomly. The only things that set up a single adventure are the biomes you choose, but their specific layouts, enemy packs, and more are all shuffled around on each entrance. It makes it harder to stake out preferred farming routes, but it also adds a little bit of freshness to a genre where memorizing level layouts is a key to progression. It's a good idea and it fits Remnant 2, but its gun-based combat is so different than other games. There are some stumbles in the design, absolutely. Plenty of gamers were frustrated with how difficult it was to even unlock certain archetypes, classes that fundamentally change how a character can play, but as time has gone on, Remnant 2 has slowly buffed and fixed up the confusing game that, was certainly present at launch into more of a Souls staple. These are fast-paced ramp or environment battles where you'll face just everything from big, beefy melee aliens to long-ranged gun-toters, outnumbered, outgunned. You're meant to hoover up new guns and scrape through to survive the next insane random boss encounter, like a mix between Destiny, Gunfire Reborn, and Dark Souls all crammed into one. It's a ton of fun and definitely belongs here. Moving on, we have number 13, Lies of P and its Overture DLC, one of the most incredible Souls-like games that came out in the last few years, honestly. Lies of P is just a full-blown, all-out effort, and it feels like it from the moment you pick up the controller. It's beautiful, fun, and fascinating. Instead of feeling like some cheap imitation to get a couple of quick sales, Lies of P brings high-quality gameplay and some honestly creative mechanics to the table. While certainly it stands alongside some of the Nioh games, Lies of P doesn't quite fall into the Nioh trap of gear and weapon complications. Instead, Lies of P boils it down to a single character, one that starts with base weapons but can really mix and match components as things go on. It's refreshing because you can move a blade to a bigger handle and change weapon combos and properties that way, and you can build a kit around what works for the player, possibly keeping a weapon style that you actually might prefer, which again is very much my kind of thing. It keeps the experience simple by choice. Lies of P doesn't let you create more powerful weapons in a straightforward way. Instead, mixing and matching is supposed to be like an experimental thing, and it really works for everything else the game brings. I mean, the story is surprisingly engaging for a Pinocchio game. There's intense boss battles, crazy environments to explore, and just downright next-level graphics for this type of game. If you haven't played it yet, you should definitely check it out. At number 12, we have Lords of the Fallen, and I'm talking about the 2.0 version. While I was a defender of the game when it came out, I also recognized there were a lot of things that needed fixing. There were weird animations, plenty of jank everywhere, and a lot of work idealism, a lot of the stuff you expect to see sometimes in an indie game, sometimes in a AAA game where everyone was rushed. But the point is, everyone worked to jam more stuff in, and that's something like the original Lords of the Fallen kind of had. Now, a complete overhaul of the entire game has been done by the developers with the 2.0 update, and this deserves to be recognized because it's basically what Lords of the Fallen probably should have been: a very polished, very fun game where everything is snappier, faster, more responsive. The co-op is much better. Audio has been overhauled with a lot of improvements to weapons, and ultimately a lot of this stuff really had to be overhauled to make this game feel better. And Lords of the Fallen 2.0 does that and makes Lords of the Fallen really stand out, as if it's not some clunky, badass, beautiful looking Souls like that and has some glitches and exploits and stuff. You can tell these developers had a good idea here with stunning visuals, incredible graphics, some very important innovative ideas, you know, like swapping between the real world and this twisted, shape-shifting, horrible monster realm. There was a gimmick here that I think honestly worked with better movement, better pacing, and a lot more to Lords of the Fallen. In the 2.0 version, loyal fans will certainly say it goes way beyond the original too. At number 11, without a doubt, this is one game that certainly deserves this placement. No Rest for the Wicked's The Breach update fills the Souls-like game with a lot more new adventure, a lot more new things, and just ultimately perfects the experience into one of the coolest Souls-likes. There's new zones, there's new challenges, there's new weapons, and a whole lot more in this update. And frankly, it makes No Rest for the Wicked a timeless masterpiece of pain. Set in a plague-ridden world that's kind of encased in a suffocating fog, this game hits you hard. You'll have a lot of mechanics to deal with a short stamina bar that's cut in half by inventory weight, with quick slots designed for equipping tons of different weapons and really nothing else. It's a game that goes for the From Software market and succeeds wildly, taking you on an entirely different voyage to these haunting, ruined locations. The world is simpler, more refined, and No Rest for the Wicked pushes the Souls-like formula in interesting directions by incorporating things like building your homes. They're a necessity that isn't present in other games. This game is incredibly complex, but delights in secrets that are only present for the most dedicated and perceptive players. It's one of those special games with a level of detail and really a lure that runs very deep. Next on the list, believe it or not, we have another Crab's Treasure, and this is a new game, but by no means is it any lesser than the previous title. Another Crab's Treasure is the perfect beginner Souls-like game. It's a game of cooperative crustacean-infused mayhem filled with deep, dark underwater areas, campsites, and sunken ships. These are zones riddled with danger, often massively outscaling the size and strength of your bite-sized little hermit crab character. But you can take down these big, scary bosses with makeshift weapons and trigger skills, things like metal bottle caps that protect your fragile shell from harm, or foil deadly attacks, or parry with precision timing and unleash the strike. I know from looking at this game, it might be a little hard to believe I'm actually describing a pretty dead-on Souls-like game distilled into something for like older kids and up. But that's what this game is like. It's a hell of a lot of fun with a fair amount of challenge. It's got accessibility settings too, like a lot of games in the list so far, but it's a lot of fun and really can teach people skills that they can transfer to other games when eventually they want to jump into the genre if they haven't already. At number 9, Enotria, the last song is a beautiful, if imperfect Souls-like that is well worth your time. Set in a fantasy world inspired by Italian folklore, it brings a gorgeous art direction and some pretty interesting ideas to the table. Not all of these ideas work as well as intended, but the game has enough going for it and it's fun. It's got a rich in-game compendium for all of the bits of lore. It's got in-depth stuff for all the bits of lore that you're gonna come across in chests and boss fights, and if you're a fan of Italian theatrical tradition, you're going to get a lot out of the commedia dell'arte stuff. It's probably going to appeal to you a lot. The depiction of every actor forced into playing their part in the Canovaccio, with the player character being the odd one out to try to resist the darkness, the evil that has plagued the land. And that's at least kind of bringing into the surface the idea of what this game brings to the table. A lot of other Souls-likes don't really have as much. It's compelling as both a game and a story, and just really a setting. Enotria, the last song, is a whole hell of a lot of fun, and definitely, again, very compelling in ways a lot of other Souls-likes aren't. Next up at number 8, we have Stellar Blade. This is a sleek, sexy, and incredibly HD type game that has an impressive level of skill and self-confidence to it despite being very different by design. This female lead is unique to control because a lot of it is actually about flicking your sword back and forth and dodging in a way that certainly allows itself to differentiate. It's a combo-centric parry and dodge-heavy Souls-like game, and a pretty damn good one. There are a lot of smart features here in this ever-evolving game from when they designed it for player progression. You can upgrade your weapon for more intricate combo flows. You can get better at precision dodging so it extends the free hit windows. Stellar Blade is a game completely dedicated to staying in the face of your enemies and absolutely dismantling them as quickly and ruthlessly as possible. It's hell-bent on destruction, and you have access to these interesting gadgets and tools that allow your heroine to really stand out in the field. The story may not be groundbreaking, but it is cool. It's got a great sci-fi, sexy world, and it's a highly enjoyable game to play. It's really cool looking. It's really kind of that escapist type stuff. The game is all about pushing forward, trying to stay on the edge against these enemies, and it's relentlessly fun. It's one of those games where you feel like you're messing up, but you're still messing people up. And that's fun feeling in a game, right? Next up, we have Bleak Faith Forsaken. This is an open world, like a vast open world, and Souls-likes don't typically go together other than Elden Ring. And honestly, if you want one that pushes it a little further than hell, Bleak Faith Forsaken is it. It's a game that is super ambitious and has a lot more creativity than you might expect, and a lot more mystery packed into an already huge dark adventure. Yet it was developed originally by only 3 people. It's another game that gets by on some jank, but the world is so mysterious and off-putting, it's kind of accidentally compelling. Even when on the surface, you don't really know what you're playing here. It's pretty awesome looking. It's certainly not for the impatient. Dying slows down the game massively. Getting around is more of a slog than most Souls-likes. But if you're into it, there's a lot here that you're really going to appreciate. There's lots of these fun little secrets, hidden paths, frightening enemies, and if you love trying to piece together the little bits of lore, it's another game with tons of environmental storytelling. Sometimes it's awkward, but Bleak Faith is never boring. At number 6, we have Wukong Fallen Dynasty. This is sort of Nioh meets Sekiro. It's kind of like Team Ninja's chance to create a Sekiro game. And while in a lot of ways it's not exactly apples to apples and it's still a Nioh game at its core, it's something that's one of the most fun and interesting Souls-like experiences you're going to get. It's a fairly simple game for something that is a Souls-like, and it is meant to be a little bit more designed for controller play, which I think works for it given the fact that that's one of my favorite ways to play these games. But at the same time, it's got things like spirit mechanics, morale, parries, the nature of combat, gearing. All of these types of things take really what starts out as sort of a fairly simple seeming game and lengthens the more you learn. You may have a time adjusting to the difficulty after figuring out the wording of the game does build up and look pretty, I guess, generally speaking, to all kinds of players. But to some people who dive right in, they may get frustrated with some difficulty spikes, but if you push through, you have an incredibly fun and hyper-addictive game that actually allows you to just keep playing after you finish and continue to keep min-maxing and fun. And it's almost like its second half of the game, that's where Wukong really does kick into gear, and the potential of the combat system just goes further and further with all of your unlocked options. Wukong Fallen Dynasty is a game that appears simple at surface level, but it's incredibly complex, especially when compared to other games like it. Coming in next at number 5, we have AI Limit. This is a fast-paced, Souls-like action RPG set in a post-apocalyptic world overrun by a deadly substance called mud. You play as Arisa, a powerful being known as a blader, tasked with restoring a broken world while unraveling its cryptic past. Unlike traditional Souls-likes, AI Limit tosses out stamina and weight systems, letting you dodge, guard, and attack freely for fluid, dynamic combat. Bosses demand quick reflexes rather than careful resource management, and the ability to dual-wield weapons mid-combo adds a stylish edge to every fight. Customization runs deep in this game, and there's also this sync rate system that keeps you active in battle, powering up your special moves and overall damage as you stay aggressive. While the parry system feels satisfying, it's arguably overpowered and contributes to a lower overall difficulty. That's the biggest knock against the game. It's simply not tough enough to satisfy hardcore fans. Still, the world design is rich, featuring interconnected paths, secrets, and side quests that make exploration rewarding. Visually and structurally, AI Limit leans into the genre's moody atmosphere while keeping things streamlined and modern. Pausable gameplay and button remapping are welcome quality of life bonuses. Despite some early bugs and uneven balance, AI Limit delivers a fresh, accessible twist on the Souls-like formula. At number 4, games like the first Berserker Khazan prove there are still new things to do with the Souls-like formula without just copying concepts wholesale or changing everything. The first Berserker is a tale of betrayal and allies that puts the player character on a wrecking path of destruction. And while it doesn't maybe nail every single aspect it attempts, it is one of the most incredible action games and Souls-like games anyone has ever come up with. A game interactive in ways you don't necessarily expect it to be. There's quality everywhere. There's unique bosses, huge maps to explore. And this is one of those games that really makes you understand the beauty and necessity of interconnected worlds and enemy design. It really makes everything unique. While feeling alive and familiar, the first Berserker Khazan reinvents the old and brings a lot of new stuff. It's one of those times where it's like, yes, of course there was good ideas to be had there, and it also has elements from a lot of other games too. There's pieces of Nioh, the checkpoint-heavy mission-based stuff, there's blocks and parries, and the fastest seamless tempo of Sekiro all woven together into one. The first Berserker is also the kind of game that can please newer players by allowing you to summon phantoms to help in fights. But the truly hardcore will want to go through this game single-handed because it is just fun. You could go without sharpening your weapon with the world you'll leave in your wake. You know that this game is bloodthirsty fun. At number 3, we have Black Myth Wukong, another unique and distinct adventure, often painful but relentlessly fun. This game has players assuming the role of the Chosen One essentially, who is significant because they get to go through an entire journey to the west. I mean, not really. It goes well beyond the journey to the west in confining a corruptive mist that turns both monsters and heroes into villainous versions out to kill you. This is a shockingly stunning game. Like, it is really a beautiful game, and it's as deep as it looks as it is beautiful. It's filled with mystery, a little bit of stupidity. Like I said, you'll be eagerly anticipating your next encounter because you just don't know what the hell you're going to see. Black Myth Wukong isn't one of those slow-plotted Souls-likes. They got a huge help on its shoulder. There's also a story going on, one that's a lot more present than some other games, one that has got a visual feast that's always beautiful to look at, but absolutely unrelenting in its challenges too. I mean, this game throws you into tough situations that feel really life or death so early, and it's fun. You can transform into different animals, shift your tactics on the fly, enchant your staff, equip relics to alter how your hero plays. Sometimes it's just a little speed boost, sometimes it's a lifesaver, sometimes these customizations completely change the way combat works. There's a lot of fun, different ways to go about it because Black Myth Wukong doesn't stop for anything. This is undoubtedly one of the best Souls-like games I've played in years. If you're into this genre, I highly recommend it. At number 2, we have Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I know Sekiro doesn't play like a Souls game, but it has more than enough shared DNA. A single long samurai adventure where you'll explore strange vistas, fight demons, and learn the nuances of the ridiculously hard combat system. One that's very different, one that stands alone. It requires you to completely rethink how Souls games function. You don't have a stamina bar anymore, doesn't affect your attacks, and your dodge rules don't have invincibility frames. Instead, they're replaced with a posture bar and exquisitely timed parries as the way you're going to stay alive. Parrying matters more than ever in Sekiro. Learning boss attacks and anticipating their combo chains is far more important. You don't learn to avoid attacks, but you learn the shatter hit combos to make them susceptible to critical wounds. Sekiro's combat is jaw-dropping and kind of leaves you breathless sometimes. Super difficult, but really rewarding in a way that nobody has gone to, I'll say, because you'll never encounter base Souls mechanics in another From Software game like Sekiro. At least you won't experience this combat anywhere else because other games refuse to copy it. Sekiro is still a hell of a lot of fun and a unique experience alongside Souls within this whole small genre. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice might just be the most difficult of all. From Software games, but in some ways lives up to the name by having more inherent life and forgiveness to go through the adventure than a standard Souls game, which is why it's well placed here and not another game. Like, we aren't just covering the #1 Souls games, we're covering the #1 games that are the best that do these type of games. And honestly, let's just go ahead and move on to #1. At #1, we have Elden Ring, alongside its arguably complete edition, the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC that extends the life of Elden Ring and adds some of the most challenging fights From Software's ever made. It's enormous, bursting with deadly bosses, lots to explore, ancient cities, just all types of lore-based pain. Elden Ring is one of the best-selling games for a reason, best reviewed too. It's a masterpiece of gaming and likely an impossibly hard act to top. It's got deadly bosses, killer soundtrack, spell-slinging action, and environments as beautiful as they are dangerous. Whether you're going through your first playthrough or spending countless hours farming bosses on the subsequent playthroughs, Elden Ring has way more to burn. It might seem strange to see what is certainly not the hardest Souls-like game, or even the hardest From Software game at #1 on our list, but this is the best game that came out of the inspiration. And while admittedly in some ways the original Souls-like game might be a better fit for this #1 spot, that honestly just doesn't matter in my opinion. Elden Ring is #1. It deserves to be #1. It should be #1. Anyway, that's all for this video. If you think there are more games that should be added to this list, let us know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.